Hey, juniors. Good to see you guys. Well, I guess I can't really see you. Good to have you on my screen. Coming at you on Sunday evening. I just got finished recording my video for my A-Push kids. And your class and their class is starting to run together. You're kind of on the same track right now, so sorry if I repeat myself. But I am going to introduce a friend. Can you hear me? Captain America was at Neighborhood Market today and looking for hand sanitizer at the counter, and Captain America was looking back at me. My family and I are watching the Marvel series, and so I have now met Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Captain Marvel, and I'm telling you, so far, he's still my favorite. So he's going to join us today. I'm going to actually move him around here, get his shield in there. Okay, so this is what's happening. Your project, your immigrant project, I have talked to a few of you via email. I'm hearing some really cool things about what you're finding out from your relatives. Some people are going to know more information than others. I have two sides of the family. One side of the family knows nothing. The other side of the family knows everything and wants to talk about it all the time. So I get a little bit of both. But it's really cool to kind of know where you're from, know your roots, and hopefully stimulating some really cool conversation with some of you and your loved ones. And so I'm going to collect that information that you're going to turn into me tomorrow and kind of go through that. I have some ideas about how I want this project to be laid out. So what we're going to do is once you've turned this initial information into me, we're going to hit the pause button. We're going to wrap up the series that we've been talking about since the end of Reconstruction. After Reconstruction, we jumped into a conversation about the Westward Plains, the Cowboys and Indians, the captains of industry, the rise of the industrial machine in the United States, classes, captains of industry, robber barons, the rush of immigrants to America and who filled a lot of those jobs in the industries. And then today what we're going to talk about, we're going to go ahead and jump into chapter 16 and just talk about bits and pieces of it, about this world that your relatives, your immigrant relatives, flooded into, this new America. And honestly, from the end of Reconstruction and to the turn of the century to 1900, 1905, 1910, the world drastically changes. So we move away from the era of horse and buggy and subsistence farming and the textile world. Of course, the back of slavery has been broken. And we entered this world of entertainment, motion pictures, the ability of people to own their own cameras, Ferris wheels, but having enough income to buy things for luxury, like a Coca-Cola, for instance, world fairs, technology, electricity. The world is going to be a different place than it was when Abraham Lincoln left the earth. Things are drastically changing. And this is the world, this is the America that those massive immigrant populations that came in through Ellis Island and in California are about to enter. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. On Wednesday, so be prepared for this, on Wednesday, you're going to have an open note, open book test. I don't ever do that or rarely do that, but circumstances call for it this time around. And so there's a little bit from chapter 13, a little bit from 14, a little bit from 15, and a little bit from 16. I will let you know specifically what you should have in front of you because you're going to be able to have your PowerPoints, your notes, your textbook. I'm going to be very specific about what you can and cannot use. You cannot Google the question. That would be cheating. But if you have your PowerPoint uploaded to your computer, you can look at that. Or your notes that you've scribbled in the margins, or your textbook. And so I will include that tomorrow. I will get that information to you tomorrow. I might actually get that to you after class. But today we're going to kind of wrap up our discussion about the world that our immigrant relatives entered in America at the turn of the century. It's pretty cool. So that's what I'm going to do now. So if you want to pull up the PowerPoint on a split screen with me talking, I will send you a Google assignment that says, did you watch the video? Did you look at the PowerPoint? Did you watch the videos associated with the PowerPoint? Just so that I can have some accountability and some way of measuring your daily grades and that sort of thing. So anyway, all right, here we go. Chapter 16. The first slide that you're going to see is a picture of the Chicago World Fair in 1893. It took place in America, and the centerpiece of the fair was this huge, massive Ferris wheel. And I think I read that 20 people could fit in each of the box cars. And there's probably 50 of these box cars that went around the Ferris wheel. You'll see a picture of it. But this people of Chicago recreated almost a European Versailles looking expose for the Chicago World Fair. It's pretty incredible. The Eiffel Tower, I couldn't remember the name of it. The Eiffel Tower was created or built by, I think, the same person that built the Ferris wheel. The Eiffel Tower is still standing, even though it was built just years before or after this particular Ferris wheel. The Ferris wheel, which was made of wood primarily, is no more and didn't last for more than probably 10 years after the Chicago World Fair. But it's a beautiful picture. You get an idea of what things looked like. Another really important part of this expo was that it was lit up with electricity. And so people were coming and they were enjoying the beautiful nature of this electric powered expo. It was quite a sight. Some other things during this era, these are just kind of random things, but entertainment was an important part, or was becoming an important part of American society, because people were beginning to make enough money to have a little bit of extra beyond just putting shoes on their kids' feet and food on the table. And so in cities like New York and Chicago, you began to see things like motion picture movies, shows, amusement parks. So like in 1884, Coney Island opened to the public, and this is outside of New York in one of the boroughs. It was an amusement park, and it had the very first roller coaster, and I think that roller coaster is actually still at Coney Island. Again, 1893, the first Ferris wheel. In 1888, Kodak camera released their first cameras released to the general public for sale, and for $25 you could own one of these box cameras, and they would give you a roll of 100 snapshots of film, and then for $2 you would send it back to Kodak, and they would develop all the film for you and send you more film. I guess they sent you the box back. The advertisement says, Kodak camera, you press the button, we do the rest. Or you can do it yourself, the only camera that anybody can use without instructions. As convenient to carry as an ordinary field glass. Worldwide success. Kodak is for sale by all photo stock dealers, and sent for primer or free. Anyway, very, very interesting. Of course, another huge thing that happened during this era, 1903, the Wright brothers, Orville and Wilbur Wright, got that plane off the ground, and it flew for 12 seconds. And flew for about 120 feet. And of course, shortly thereafter, the plans and the building of airplanes just took off. By World War I, towards the end of the war, you had a few airplanes. And of course, by World War II, war was a completely different, and people were using airplanes for travel, for leisure. In 1890, bicycles took off. And let me look here. It says in the year 1890, 10 million bikes were manufactured and sold in the United States. There's some pictures here that show them. One of the interesting things is in 1890, women were still dressing very Victorian, and so they were wearing skirts, and they would ride these bikes with their skirts, and eventually that's going to give way to split skirts and other things, and women eventually wearing pants as well. But people would ride their bikes for leisure. It gave women an opportunity to get out of the house and to get beyond their home and the people they lived near. And so it was sort of a liberating thing. I guess a modern day example that might be for younger kids who can't drive yet, and don't have the money to afford an expensive bike, maybe skateboards. By 1900, leisure foods were introduced into the market. Probably the ones that we would be most familiar with. Coca-Cola was introduced in 1886 and began to be sold as a leisure product. And Hershey chocolate bars were released in 1900. I would love to know how much they cost. I didn't put that on here. Another really significant entertainment factor during this era was the introduction of spectator sports. And baseball was the biggie at the turn of the century. The very first World Series in 1903 featured the Boston Pilgrims versus the Pittsburgh Pirates. There's some pictures here of it. The early baseball stadiums were fascinating. In 1920, a Negro Baseball League was introduced because Black Americans were not allowed to play in the white leagues. And so they formed a Negro Baseball Leagues that were extremely successful. And ultimately, of course, many of those black players began to be introduced into the regular baseball leagues, Jackie Robinson being the first significant player, black player, to enter the major leagues. There's some pictures there of them as well. Let's see what else I've got here. I think I'm going to skip over that for now. Let me switch PowerPoints real quick. Okay, let's see here. Sorry, y'all. Oh, go to the next one. Chapter 16, section 2 and 3 deal with segregation and Jim Crow, and I'm gonna talk about that separately from this particular unit. And so I was looking at that, deciding what I wanted to share and what I didn't. Chapter 16, the section 4 talks about mass democracy. And it kind of again goes back to this idea of how America had changed and becomes a society of entertainment. Here we go. So some of the things that are involved in mass culture are things that we are familiar with today. And in fact, I would say those are the things that we are probably missing the most right now. We are used to jumping into our car and running into Old Navy or grabbing a burger at Smash Burger, or going and getting our nails done, or going to a show. What movie you want to go see? Going to fast lanes and going bowling. All those things that we do for entertainment. It's hard to sit at home and figure out how to be still and to do things at home that are enjoyable, because we're used to getting and going, and that's part of our culture. So some of the things involved in mass culture, and again, this is chapter 16, section 4. The vaudeville theater was introduced. It included songs, dance, juggling, slapsticks, comedy, chorus lines, and it also introduced America to the idea of the black entertainer. You also had black entertainers and white entertainers that would do what was called blackface, and we've heard a lot about that recently in politics, but during this era, that was fairly common, and sometimes it was done by black entertainers, and sometimes it was done by white entertainers. But black entertainers had an opportunity that they took during this era to enter a world that they were forbidden from in a lot of ways, and they took advantage of the opportunity. So you did see black actors, black comedians, black singers, black musicians. The circus, the Barnum and Bailey Circus, the greatest show on earth, also traveled the country during this time, and people would pay money to get tickets to go to the show, to see unusual things. The Barnum and Bailey Circus would enter towns usually by train, and then they would do parades through the cities, and they would pass out flyers and invite people to come to see their variety shows, unusual people with unusual talents, and that included animals and gymnastics, and sometimes what they would call freak shows. If you've seen the movie The Greatest Show on Earth, they talk about how a lot of people that just were very, very unusual physically or otherwise that would participate in the circus and make money that way. The silver screen motion pictures were introduced. Initially, they were called the 5-cent Nickelodeon theaters. And that's where we get the, the show Nickelodeon, that we watched when we were kids. That comes from the first expression where it cost you a nickel to get in to see a show, so it was called a Nickelodeon. 1903, the very first modern film, and I'm actually going to send you the link to it. It's called The Great Train Robbery. It is wonderful. I think you'll enjoy it. I want you to watch it. In 1907, by the time 1907 came around, there were over 3,000 Nickelodeon movie theaters all around the country. Let's see here. I'm going to skip that. Oh, this is kind of cool. In 1890, Cincinnati, Ohio opened up the very first covered shopping center. And there's a picture of it here. It's beautiful. It had glass roof. It was enclosed. It had, looks like 2 or 3 stories where people could shop. And it was called the Arcade. So again, going back to shopping centers, department stores first came of age right after the Civil War. The very first department store was a store called Marshall Field's in Chicago, named after its owner. The tagline for their advertisements were, "Give the lady what she wants." And there's a picture here of ladies looking in the department store windows. You could go into the department store and you could get shoes, you could get curtains, you could get bath towels, you could get dishes, you could get makeup, you could get wigs, anything you wanted you could get at the department store. It was kind of everything in one place. Now Walmart takes that to a whole new level, but Marshall Field's was the very first department store. Chain stores also came into play during this era. By the turn of the century, 1910, 1911, you had several of them. Woolworth was kind of like the Walmart, 5 and dime of the era, and they ended up having 596 stores across the country, and altogether they were selling more than $1 million worth of product a year. And so again, a similar model to our Walmarts. Advertising exploded because vendors wanted people to spend their money on the products that they were selling. Probably the most popular items that were advertised were items that women would need at home, like soap and cleaning supplies. Let me look here. Skin powder, makeup type of things, Listerine, mouthwashes, Jello. We call it Jello today. That's actually a name of a product. Baker's chocolate, things that women would use in the kitchen. So advertising was definitely targeted towards women. Let's see, it says by 1900, advertisers were spending almost $100 million a year on products in magazines, newspapers, and for passing trains. So they would use trains as a place to advertise things. Let's see here. Catalog shopping also became a really big deal during this era. The two probably most famous catalogs were Montgomery Ward's, and they started producing their catalog in 1872. And then in 1876, a little while later, Sears Roebuck. And so these catalogs would fan out across the country, and people could order from those catalogs and delivered by the railroads. And actually, railroads were the precursor. A number of people that worked along the railroad lines would use these catalogs to purchase things, and eventually it became available to the public. In 1896, if you lived out in rural America where there was no train depot, a lot of these companies would promise free rural delivery. And so I can even remember as a kid, my mom would get a Sears magazine or catalog, and she would have me and my sisters circle those things that we wanted for Christmas out of the catalog. And then she would order them through the catalog, and then they would go into layaway at Sears, and she could pay a little bit through the month of December, so it didn't hit her all at once, or my parents. And it made me really sad when they stopped doing that, because I got used to every year, give me the catalog, what do I want to get? And now we have Amazon. So when my kids want something at Christmas time, I said, send me the links. So we have, our consumer society has adapted to the new technology. We still buy things, we just buy them in a different fashion. Okay, that brings me, that's kind of the end of that particular section. So, new, fun, entertaining world that our relatives, those that came before us, were introduced to into the 1900s. Things changed dramatically from the time of the Civil War and the time of the passing of Abraham Lincoln. And so, I'm going to just kind of end it there. I will encourage you guys, please watch the links, especially the Great American Train Robbery. It's pretty awesome. And a couple of other links that I have for you to watch. And then I will send you some instructions about what to expect for Wednesday. So send me your immigrant project homework. Watch the video, look at the PowerPoint, watch the video clips, and then wait for instructions for Wednesday. Just make sure that on Wednesday you have everything you need to answer the questions. So that's really kind of essentially what you need to know. So love you guys. I hope you have a great night. I will, I guess, see ya tomorrow. Bye.